week's Top Gear. Small is most definitely beautiful. Tiff tests the latest from Lamborghini. The will to win. Top Gear's crack mechanics race to build a Westfield. And I drive the latest from the people who claim to have invented the people carrier.
Right now, if you want to buy a new Lamborghini, you've got three choices: a Diablo, or a Diablo. From the standard two-wheel drive at £144,000 to the four-wheel drive at £159,000, and then this, one of the few limited edition SEs still available, for a cool £175,000. The SE was created in 1993 to celebrate Lamborghini's 30th anniversary. Just 150 were built, and with the 5.7-litre V12 tweaked to give 520 horsepower and the chassis trimmed to be 10% lighter, it's fast. Very fast. The official figures are 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, a top speed of 206 miles an hour. But all I really care for is the fact that that power goes through the rear wheels. And that means just one thing: oversteer. But there is a feeling that perhaps the extravagant days of the big supercar are numbered. You need a lottery win to buy one and a private track like this to have any fun. So the rich are beginning to act with a little more sense and quite happily making do with a Ferrari 355 or a 911 Turbo. So what Lamborghini need is a little Lambo for less than 100 grand. And this is what the Ital design company is suggesting it should look like. Their Cala concept car. With competition from Diablo designer Marcello Gandini and new in-house Lamborghini man Peter Stevens, who penned the McLaren F1. Ital design are hoping these seductive lines will win them the contract for the final design, scheduled for production in the next 2 to 3 years.
It is a researching prototypes, I mean a show car, dream car, but it is really close to a mass production car, so it can be realized for production very easily. The car has to be a very economical car, so not like the Diablo, for example, are to be produced in many different numbers, and of course has to be a Lamborghini as an image.
So how is the Lamborghini image in this car?
We have to show, we have to design a car that looks like a Lamborghini. I mean, I don't have to read Lamborghini name. So we took all the details of the history of Lamborghini. For example, there are some details in the front, looks like the Countach, the bell line looks like the Diablo, the front lights, headlights like the Miura. So.
And what is there one piece that you like especially on the car?
The engine is not bad. The engine, I mean, now you know, if we look at the top of the windscreen, we designed this strange top for two motivations. Was one for styling, to have something different, and one to give inside a lot of lights.
It's just a shame that these concept cars can't be driven.
No, as all the Ital design prototypes, you can drive it. I got the key, you can drive it.
Give me the keys. Right. The Cala is based on the running gear of a previous prototype built in the mid-80s. It's got a 3.9-litre V10 in the back, producing 400 horsepower. But the ride and handling haven't really been sorted out yet, so there's plenty of shake and rattle and roll. But what Giugiaro has done is create this perfect driving position with the steering wheel out away from the dashboard and very much part of the driver. What I also like is the fact when I look in my rear view mirror, I can see the throttles opening and shutting. But the Cala is not really about driving, it's about style, a fashion statement for the future. And even if Ital Design don't get the final contract, it's not the end of the world.
We did the investment. We did this investment to show our mind in this kind of car. Anyway, it's been planned to be a research prototype.
Like a catwalk model strutting the latest creation, you have to be impressed by the sheer beauty of the Cala. But whether or not this particular design ever hits the streets remains to be seen.
BMW, the ultimate symbol of 80s affluence. But in the 90s, their image has begun to change. Words like recycle and environment are creeping into the Sunday supplement advertising blurb. BMW, it seems, have seen the light and gone green.
They reckon that 80% of this 3 Series convertible is recyclable. In fact, the car's been designed very much with easy dismantling in mind. All the components have their raw materials clearly marked, so it's easy to separate plastics and rubbers when it comes to recycling, when the car eventually heads for the knacker's yard. Now that's the theory, but is it really going to happen in practice?
Well, BMW have put their money where their mouth is, investing in a joint venture with the vehicle dismantlers to create the most advanced indoor recycling operation in Europe.
It's a bit like the maternity nurse has married the undertaker. Old BMWs are received in by us and we dismantle them. And they're either crashed, they're MOT failures, or in the case of the 540 V8 that's being dismantled in the plant today, that was stolen and subsequently written off. To sum up, it's really like a production line in reverse, with the car at the beginning of the day being complete and by the end of that day being down to a bare body shell. Glass is removed and stored, or alternatively crushed, and together with other recyclable plastics and metals is sold on to companies that specialise in this field. We're currently dismantling, I suppose, around about 600 cars a year.
The plant's designed to be as energy efficient as possible. Rails set into the floor are friction resistant, which means one gentle push and the car simply glides along to the next part of the dismantling process. They've even found a use for the oil which they drain from the dismantled cars behind me. In fact, it goes into a huge 4,000-gallon tank beneath here and is used to fuel the central heating system in the winter for the whole of the factory. So with all that attention to detail, you might assume that BMW are flavour of the month with the environmental lobby.
Any car manufacturer is going to be claiming to be better for the environment than his competitors. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as a green car. Building a half a ton of metal full of sophisticated machinery is bound to damage the environment, and the more that we can do to cut down on car use and car production, the better. And that goes for parts too. If we can reuse and recycle old parts in new vehicles, we can cut down on pollution and damage to the environment from the manufacturing process.
Now, you can't seriously expect car manufacturers to sign their own death warrant to make less cars. But what about reusing the parts? Well, Bolney Motors are doing their bit for the environment by selling on the serviceable parts from the cars they dismantle.
Interior trim, carpets and seats, bumpers and bodywork. Even whole engines and gearbox units are removed for careful inspection before being sold on. Oily parts like sumps and casings go to be cleaned in the biggest dishwasher in the world. After a high-pressure wash and brush up, they come out shining. Magic.
BMW owners save pounds and keep their cars on the road for longer. So if you need a headlamp assembly set for an 86 325i, well, brand new, it will cost you £125. As a used part, £55. Or maybe you need a new front grille for your 87 7 Series. If you're going to pay the full list price, we're talking £58. As a used part, £25. But there's more to it than simply providing a high-tech recycling centre and a second-hand parts business. It's a moral commitment to the environment which is soon to become compulsory and not just voluntary.
European Union legislation due for the end of 1996 looks likely to make car companies take responsibility for their end-of-life vehicles and sets a rising scale of targets for car recyclability over the next 10 years. Manufacturers who currently sell 1.9 million cars a year in the UK have all visited the plant to find out whether this state-of-the-art facility could provide a blueprint for their future.
This is the car we saw this morning. In 8 hours it's been reduced to a pile of recyclable raw materials. All the usable parts have been cannibalised, cleaned and shelved, ready to keep other BMW owners on the road a little longer. So if you want to drive something which is a little kinder to the environment, then forget about lean burn engines, brand new diesels and electrically powered vehicles. The greener option might well be to buy an older car and keep it going with second-hand parts. I said old, I never said anything about being boring.
Now there may be some of you labouring under the misconception that us and the Americans speak the same language. Well, we don't, do we? And to prove my point, I've enlisted the help of my colonial cousin, Charles Berry. Howdy, you all can call me Chuck. Yes, very good. Now pay attention, what's this? Why, that's a hood. No, that's a bonnet. A hood is something that you have on an anorak. What in tarnation is an orack? So what's that? That is a trunk. No, that is a boot. A trunk is what an elephant uses to pick up a sticky bun. Elephant? Alright, what do you call this then? Why, that's a fender. No, that is a wing. This is a fender. Hit it, Jimmy.
But, like it or not, us and the Americans are about to have a whole lot more in common. For the best part of the 20th century, they've been content to sell us their software, music and films. Now we're going to get the hardware. That means fast food with a ketchup already in it and motors like this. But what is it?
Now this is what Chuck would call a minivan. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that is not a minivan. And you're right. I know you're right, because we had a minivan. Ex-GPO it was. My father painted it blue and put caravan windows in the side so we could see out. It's a people carrier, like a Renault Espace. Well, yes and no. Actually, a Renault Espace is like a Chrysler Voyager. It was the Americans who invented the people carrier.
Chrysler claimed to have dreamt up the minivan, big interior, small exterior, easy access and front-wheel drive, way back in 1973. But they didn't build it until 1984, when the world, i.e. America, was ready. So far, they've sold 5 million.
So if it's such a raging success, how come we haven't seen it in the UK? Well, there are a few reasons. First, the styling. The previous incarnations of the Voyager didn't resemble a motor car so much as a mobile Wurlitzer. The steering wheel's always been on the wrong side, but that's never been as big a problem as the sliding door. When the sliding door was on the wrong side, it wasn't just difficult for Chrysler to sell the Voyager in the UK, it was technically illegal. The solution is simple. 2 sliding doors. And it only took them 10 years.
Someone has decided that MPVs must have 7 seats, and so Voyager does. But 3 Steve Berries were quite enough, thank you. The seats roll in and out quickly, leaving enough space to stage the Super Bowl. I reckon that Voyager is the best looking MPV yet. Although I still think that my solution to the same transportation problem, a Ducati and 6 bus passes, looks even better. But I'm sure that MPV buyers are far less interested in the image than the engineering.
Up the front there's the option of a 2-litre petrol engine, a 2.5-litre turbo diesel, or a 3.4 or 3.8 V6. Although the Americans don't get the 2-litre and we don't get the turbo diesel. All the American cars are automatic, but we get the option of a 5-speed manual transmission. Sorry, gearbox. The instruments are all easy to read, the buttons are all easy to reach, just like in a car. The seat's comfy, just like a car. It's a quiet, undemanding, uninvolving vehicle to drive, just like most cars. The Chrysler Voyager has become the vehicle they always wanted it to be. It used to be a converted van. It's now a big car.
Will the wind ever remember?
Voyager will be with us in the spring. There are no prices as yet, but Chrysler expect to take sales from Espace and Galaxy at the 18 to 20 grand mark, which is where those two are strongest. Chuck assures me that when it gets to Britain, it'll kick ass. But I'm telling you, if anyone lays so much as a moccasin on Daisy and Dobbin, they'll have me to answer to.
Now this is a highly desirable car, a 1936 Delahaye 135 competition, one of the finest examples of French automotive engineering. But in fact it's quite mundane compared to this bit of French automotive ingenuity. What on earth is this, Roger?
1921 propeller-driven Liat.
Good Lord, what was the story behind these type of cars?
Well, I think the man who designed it or invented it was a propeller maker during the First World War, and I think he thought it would be a good idea to make a car that was actually driven by a propeller, because it actually hasn't got a transmission or a gearbox or anything like that, so it's pretty straightforward. And as a cycle car, it seemed like a good idea at the time, because it's very expensive to buy a proper car after the First War, and little light cars like this were very popular in France. And they certainly used them. I think one fellow used one for 15, 20 years and drove everywhere in it. So you can imagine driving along the dusty French roads in one of these must have been something else.
How popular were they in their heyday?
I would have thought 50 or 60 were made. There's certainly people still alive that remember seeing them on the road before the Second War.
So what made you first get involved with this?
Well, I took the Delahaye to a retrospective in Le Mans, and just happened to walk into the museum at Le Mans, and there it was. There was a propeller car, first time I'd ever seen one in the flesh, and I was, if you like, bowled over. You know, I thought, what a wonderful device. Imagine what that would be like. And one thing led to another, and well, here we are, you know, 10 years down the road.
So, using Marcel Layat's 1921 designs, Roger has spent the past decade recreating his own helicar. With a plywood chassis for lightness, cable-operated rear-wheel steering, and an original ABC engine made, would you believe, in Walton-on-Thames. After turning on the ignition, it was now time to see whether the contraption actually worked. Good Lord, what a lot of noise it makes! Right, what do you do now?
I think we'd better go and cash it.
Right, I've got the gear on, I'm ready for action.
No, you don't need that. Throw that away, that's it.
Oh.
That's it, in you go. Ever so simple.
I'll never get in. Oh yes, we're in. Don't need that. Now then, what's it all for?
Well, there's the ignition on your left.
Yeah.
That's the accelerator.
Yeah.
There are the brakes.
Yeah.
That's a handbrake.
And what's that for?
That's the petrol.
Oh, we'll need that.
So
right.
when you get the revs up, handbrake off and off you go. Best of luck.
All right, thank you. Roger was on board to give me helicar driving tips, but when it came to it, I could hardly hear a word. My goodness, what an experience! This is the steering is so direct. The right foot brake was on two shafts. Don't worry about the brakes. I'm worried about the brakes. We're coming down to a bend.
With the wind in your hair of 1,000 races. Climb on back and we'll go for a ride in the sky.
After a bit I got the hang of it and got up to a frightening 40 miles an hour. In actual fact, he frequently did 75 miles an hour in their prime in the 20s. That must have been a petrifying experience, and I was pleased that Rogers wasn't quite that powerful, and thanking my lucky stars that there was no other traffic on the road. Apparently there's another helicar in France, and Rogers' ambition is to take his there to race it along the Champs-Élysées in Paris. I just hope he doesn't ask me to go with him.
This is a Westfield. It's a sports car with a 1.7 litre Ford engine and 120 horsepower. Now that might not sound like much, but this car only weighs as much as a well-fed Jack Russell, so it goes like Billy-O. You take one of these out on a summer's day, you won't give a stuff who won the lottery. Now you can buy one like this off the shelf for 10 grand, or you can get hold of all the parts and build it yourself. Okay, your wife might leave you, but you will save £1.5 grand if you take the DIY method. The question is, just how easy is it to take all these parts, put them together, and end up with something that looks like a car and not a washing machine?
There's only one way to find out, so we borrowed 4 Westfield kits and some garage space from Brands Hatch. Now, we could have got a car bore and a tank top to build them, but 5 minutes of that and you'd put a brick through the telly. So, we gathered together 3 crack teams of motoring experts and the cream of Top Gear, who, the night before, were deep in conference.
Not now!
And here we are at sunny Brands Hatch, and this is the game show called Build Your Own Westfield and Drive it for a lap round Brands Hatch. And let's meet the teams. First, the engineering boffins from Imperial College London, horsewhipped out of the bar especially for the day. The Eggheads are joined by Supreme Autos, direct from under the arches in King's Cross, London. And the crafty Cockneys look relaxed, unlike the hot favourites, the Ford Touring Car Mechanics. And finally, Top Gear. Oh, well, Michelle Newman anyway. At last, the teams are ready. Has any event at Brands ever surpassed this? Yeah, most days I think. Bang. Progress is surprisingly swift, with suspension units going on smoothly and few early hitches. Except for Top Gear, who were, let's say, handicapped by a mechanical simpleton. Oh no, not him as well.
This is soft. Hey, I know what I'm doing. So this upper wishbone here, which means we start again. You give interesting habits. Get your hair cut. Right.
Where's your pen knife? Can you throw that knife over?
Morning, this is Chris Smith, who owns Westfield, builds the damn things, sells them. But not today, he's watching 4 of his children being born today. And half an hour's gone. Chris, tell us what's happening. Give us an update.
Like I said, they're all progressing extremely well. Most of them have followed the instructions, not all of them.
Most.
Few mistakes, but nothing crucial. Probably the worst retrograde mistake has been done by Top Gear.
Yeah?
But that's been rectified now.
What did they do?
They put a wishbone on in the wrong direction behind the shock absorber.
But no sooner had Chris finished his roundup than the well-oiled Ford team had the engine slotted in and the suspension and brakes fitted and fettled. After just 1 hour, Imperial College, the Arches boys and of course Ford have got the engines in along with the suspension and drive shafts. And Top Gear, well...
Look, Jeremy's going to put the engine in. What's this?
It's too low. No, stop, don't put your weight. Yeah.
What's all this?
Just never you mind.
Clearly Jeremy has never troubled his bookshelf with a Haynes manual. But how easy is it for a dimwit to build his own car?
If you are sensible, follow the instructions that we put forward and rely on us to help if you require any help. We have a technical hotline during all opening hours. Then there's no reason why anybody can't build a car.
Are they different in any way from standard production cars to make it easier for people to build them?
They are, because they're not built in subcomponents, they're built in individual suspension components. So they're more like a racing car than a normal conventional road car.
Right. Yeah, there's a hole cut in the transmission tunnel to allow you to fill the gearbox. Yeah. It's in the wrong place. So you just have to lift the engine up an inch sort of thing to be able to get access to the filler hole.
So you've done a premature engine insertion?
I think somebody's cut the hole in the wrong place, frankly.
Ooh. Chris reckoned on 10 hours to build a car, but Ford shredded that timetable. We're talking showing off here.
54 minutes in, and they've already got all the coloured bits on the car. They've got the engine in, he's putting the dashboardy bit on, and everybody else has still got a skeleton.
Time for some Dick Dastardly behaviour to even things up.
Alan, 20 quid and a novel Ford.
Coming into the difficult bit where these sprockets, the wishbones,
Top Gear's played its Joker!
Amazingly, Tony's presence seemed to be working.
Top Gear are progressing extremely well. I would say they're close second to third, in between Supreme and them.
This is a big moment now. They're going to get the car going by towing it, and that should get the engine turning over.
The sound of that engine meant victory for the pros, and not far behind were the boys from under the arches.
In about 2 seconds, these guys are going to start the engine. 2 hours and 30 minutes into the contest.
Yes, a fine second place. And as team boss Alan heads off to flog the Westfield at the nearest auction, the Top Gear team pulled Jeremy out of the car, having mistaken him for the drive shaft. Will they be third?
We initially we went a bit wrong because Tiff decided he wanted lunch at about 10:30, so we've had a few delays. Quite a lot left to do inside, the interior obviously, and balancing the wheels, that sort of things. But the boys are quietly confident.
Quietly competent, more like. For as the Top Gear team struggle miserably towards the finish line, the eggheads from Imperial College snatch third place, leaving Top Gear no choice but to put on a brave face.
Just running it in.
Yes, very good, Tiff, very clever. But I think I'd rather be driving home in that one.
Next week, Jeremy sparks off fireworks in a Volvo. I get to play with some seriously interesting toys. And Andy Woolman laments the end of the line for VW's Corrado.